Thank you, Chief. Starting with roll call for Bolinas Fire District, do we have George Krakauer?
Here.
Do we have Todd Kusmano?
Here.
Do we have John Stefanski?
Here.
Do we have Dan Schwartz?
Here.
For County of Marin, Chief Jason Wepper.
Here.
For Inverness, David Briggs.
Jim Fox sitting in for David Briggs.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to the meeting. For Kentfield Fire, Chief Pomey.
Here.
For Marinwood, Eric Drakeson.
Here.
For Muir Beach, Chief Chris Gove. For Novato Fire District, Chief Bill Tyler.
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow Fire, Chief Dan Mahoney.
Here.
For Southern Marin Fire, Chief Chris Tubbs. For Stinson Beach Fire, Chief Jesse Perry. For the Town of Corte Madera, Adam Wolf.
Here.
For the Town of Fairfax, Heather Abrams. For the Town of Ross, Krista Johnson. And for the Town of San Anselmo, Dave Donnery. And sir, we do have a quorum. Since we have virtual attendees, we will need to go to roll call vote for actions taken today.
Thank you, Martina. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
All righty. Seeing none, for public comments, we'll open it to public comment. The public is welcome to address the Operations Committee. Matters not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the committee. Pursuant to government code, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter on the agenda. Comments be no longer than 2 minutes and should be respectful of the community. And as a reminder to everyone, please silence your cell phones and mute your mics when you're not reporting out. Are there any public comments?
And Chief, there are no hands at this time.
All righty. Seeing none, we'll move on to Planning and Program Manager report.
Good morning, everyone. So I just have a few updates for the group, and I'll lean on Mark for a couple of talking points here. Just a few updates on things that we're up to. The Defensible Space Alliance is staffing up. We've got 35 inspectors on board for the season. Returning inspectors started early so we could squeeze in more inspections for the year. The full team will get going in mid-June and probably finish in October. The goal here is to generally inspect every property every other year. And so 2023 inspected properties will probably get a visit this year, plus some additional properties as requested from different agencies. The CHIPPR program is, there's an annual report available online. We completed around 4,700 pickups last year. Signups are starting this month, and this season will start in April. We'll run around 30 weeks, 6 rounds of chipping events, and as they circulate around the different zones. And Stephen's going to talk more about this program a little later today. The grants program has been hard at work dispersing the last remaining dollars that have been allocated through the main reimbursement program. Those dollars were allocated very early, very high demand, and now staff is finishing up that coordination with different residents to make sure all of their receipts are in. The direct assistance program has been working in Novato and Southern Marin, and invitations are going out in San Rafael and Central Marin next for that program, and we'll hear more about this proposal for next year later on today. We've been working really hard with all the different member agencies to collect data on vegetation management projects as they're implemented in the field. This has been really huge and a big lift, as you know. We have consultants, our modelers, our GIS consultant, and staff all working on creating dashboards to show where projects are being implemented on the landscape, both in terms of a public viewing dashboard and kind of internal metrics and tracking the nitty-gritty details of how projects are being implemented, and then how they then are reducing actual risk on the landscape. With the task force meeting coming up later on this month, we'd really like to get some of these items up and available for the public to see by late March. So we're excited to be moving quickly on that. We have some events coming up. As I mentioned, the task force meeting and CWI are coming up later on this month. And I'm going to go to that bullet first and ask Mark if you'd like to provide an update.
This will be the last time you have to hear me update about CWI and task force coming up. So California Wildfire Institute and the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force, two entities that kind of focus towards wildfire resilience. One of them is much more data and academia related, that's CWI, and the other group is much more practitioner related, that's the task force. And the goal of having them both hosted in Marin is to bring the two groups together and kind of make that connection between data, academia, and on the ground work. The CWI is an invite only. They try to keep it to a small, intimate type group. So that'll be Tuesday, the 25th. On the 26th, we are having what we're calling our bridge event, and it is a keynote speaker, Daniel Swain from UCLA, and also a Marin County resident to talk about climate change and the impacts on wildfire. The reception starts at 4:30, and the chat will start at 6. Then on Thursday, that's when the task force meeting starts, mostly panel discussions. There will be a panel discussion on the LA fires, then a short one on the governor's executive order that Ann's going to touch on. Then Marin Wildfire and One TAM is going to have a panel discussion. It'll be facilitated by Michael Wara from Stanford, also a Marin resident. Jason will be the lead, followed by Julie McMillan, followed by me, and then Claire Mooney from One TAM. And we're going to talk about how Marin Wildfire has come together. The next panel discussion will be about data and sharing that data with the public. And then the final panel will be about the Fire Foundry, where we actually have a couple of the Fire Foundry graduates talking about their experience through the Fire Foundry. And then on Friday, it's all site visits and visiting many of the different projects, both Marin Wildfire funded and non-Marin Wildfire funded projects throughout Marin.
Great, thanks, Mark. Couple other items. We are working on another public field trip or site visit. We're going to focus on the Ross Valley Shaded Field Break this time and really reach out to residents, especially in the Cascade Canyon area. We've had a lot of residents in that area bring cookies and drinks and refreshments to the crews. They've been so happy to see those crews out there. So we'd like to bring some attention to that area and get the residents out and talk to them about the project. This is a photo of somebody on that crew using a weed wrench to pull by hand broom. So typical work on the Ross Valley Shaded Field Break. Every year we host a field refresher course for member agency staff who are working in the field. And this year that will be March 18th at 9 a.m. Many of your staff members may end up attending. The idea is to connect them directly with biologists, geologists, cultural resources folks, etc., to make sure that we can get any questions answered and kind of dig into the nitty-gritty of how to implement a project in the field. Yep. And that is repetitive, so that's it for that. Each year I remind member agencies, and we talked about this at the ATC, that there are two different contracting pathways to help streamline contracting for vegetation management projects. I won't go into the details here, but your staff has this information. There's a list of pre-qualified contractors for smaller projects, generally under 600,000 is, or sorry, 60,000 is where we find that the most useful. We also have master services agreements, and you can write a task order with MWPA staff for specific activities for these 11 contractors that have master services agreements with us. So we enjoy working with member agencies to try to streamline contracting for veg management projects. It's not required. It's just a useful pathway if desired.
When we had the ATC, I asked the ATC members for feedback because the whole idea behind the pre-approved list and the master services agreement is to increase efficiency and to decrease the workload on your staffs to be able to get contractors on the ground. So I asked them for feedback. If the process isn't working well, let us know so that we can make tweaks to that process so we can get contractors on the ground faster.
And that's it for my report. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from Operations Committee members online, in person? Hearing none. Move on to the consent calendar and I'd open it up for public comment for anyone that would like to comment on the consent calendar.
Chief, there are no hands at this time.
Fantastic. And this is the approval of the minutes from the 13th and February 13th, and January 23rd. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, first by Bill, second by Krista, and we'll go to roll call.
Certainly, sir. Starting with Bolinas,
Yes.
Mill Valley,
Yes.
City of San Rafael,
Yes.
the City of Larkspur, County of Marin,
Yes.
Inverness,
Yes.
Kentfield,
Yes.
Marinwood,
Yes.
Novato,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow. He is not here for this meeting. Stinson Beach,
Yes.
Town of Corte Madera,
Yes.
and the Town of Ross.
Yes.
And sir, motion passes by unanimous vote of all in attendance.
All righty, moving on to discussion items. And the first one is a summary of the governor's emergency proclamation.
Great. So I'll just share my screen here. I have conveyed this information to the ATC and member agency staff, but wanted to make sure you're all aware of the emergency proclamation that Gavin Newsom's office released on March 1st. The idea here is to fast track vegetation management projects for fuel reduction. It suspends certain state, not federal, but state statutes, rules, regulations, and requirements that fall under the Cal EPA and the California Natural Resources Agency. So this includes quite a lot, including CEQA and the Coastal Act. It also probably includes other things like the air district, maybe some of the burn permitting, maybe doing work in riparian areas under CDFW's permitting process. We don't have all the details yet. So I sat down with our CEQA attorney and our environmental compliance consultant and kind of ran through all of the language, looked at what some of the other proclamations in the past have done, and we have kind of an interpretation of where things are now. And so I'm going to share that with you. At some point, we'll have more information and we'll share that with you as well. So what do we know now? The kinds of projects that this is targeting are really the kinds of things that we do. That includes vegetation management for fire risk reduction, defensible space work, shaded fuel break work, etc. So our work fits really well under this suspension. It does not apply to already approved projects. If we've got projects on the landscape, we've already done our CEQA, we're already implementing, this does not affect those projects at all. Business as usual for all of those. The process, they didn't eliminate all process for new projects. They're just streamlining it. So there is going to be a process for projects to be considered under this suspension. The process will include us receiving at some point a state environmental protection plan, or an EPP. This is something they've done for other proclamations as well. Usually takes a couple of months, maybe 1 or 2 months for that to come out. So we're waiting for that to come out. That'll have a lot more information about how to comply with this. What's likely is that it will have a long list of best management practices that need to be incorporated into your project to be considered for this. So what I'm guessing, and this is just a guess, is that look a lot like the requirements for the Cal VTP, etc. We'll probably skip all the process. It'll probably mean you skip all the process for going through the Cal VTP evaluation, And then you get to the endpoint and you just incorporate all those best management practices that have other acronyms, SPRs and et cetera. And then you need to submit your project, your project description, how you're incorporating your BMPs, and who knows what else, maybe GIS files, I'm not sure, to the state, that state agency. So that state agency secretary then determines that your project is compliant. They list your project on their website, and then you're good to go. This, so far, according to the language, only applies to projects that are initiated in 2025. There's no definition for the word initiated. So our guess right now is that it's projects that have not yet submitted a CEQA document. There's nothing, you haven't started implementing your project yet. Does it apply past 2025? Maybe. We don't know yet. The emergency proclamation also references modifying the CalVTP process. So what we think, this is probably a stopgap measure while they modify the CalVTP document and process to make it easier to comply with. It may also mean future changes to the Coastal Act. It may also mean future exemptions to CEQA that you can take advantage of for fire fuels reduction projects. We don't know, but for now, we're assuming that our projects that would be new to us, we will write up our project descriptions. We will incorporate our project design and implementation features. Those are our best management practices for an environmental community, for stewardship of ecological resources and cultural resources. We'll continue doing all of that good work and stewardship as usual, because we've built a huge amount of trust with the environmental community, and we want to continue building trust and doing the things that we said we were going to do. It's baked into our JPA language. It's how we do business. We'll incorporate those into our project descriptions. We'll wait for best management practices to come out from the state, incorporate those, and then we'd like to be first in line for whatever submissions make sense to go to the state for this suspension. We have a lot of questions. We're kind of guessing here and flying blind. We didn't know this was coming at all. But I think that this could be advantageous for some projects. So I think we should consider really using this, particularly projects in the coastal zone and projects that we were planning on drafting CalVTP documents for. It would save time and get those projects out on the landscape sooner rather than later. And it'll save taxpayer dollars that can then be used towards implementation by reducing the process. We still have costs associated with environmental compliance for continued implementation of our projects. So you'll see the JPA-wide proposal still includes an environmental compliance budget. Still have a lot of questions about what that looks like for the next year. But I did take out a couple of items that we know we won't be pursuing given that this is in place. So we think we have a pretty good path forward. We're awaiting more information, but we think that this could really benefit certain projects like work in the coastal zone, some of the work in Southern Marin that we were planning on pursuing a CalVTP document for, et cetera. And I think in the end, it reduces the process, but doesn't reduce the quality of the end product. It's still going to incorporate a lot of best management practices, our own PDIFs, and still will be really protective of resources on the landscape. So I've been talking about this with the environmental community. The first thing I did was, after meeting with our CEQA council, was set a meeting with our environmental stakeholders and talk through it, answer questions, and then talk to the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership in their meeting earlier this week. And we're just in touch with our CEQA attorney to see if there are any updates here and there, and we'll find out as soon as there are some. So that's it for that item. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Chief Perry.
Well, I'm excited.
Thought it might be relevant for you.
So my question relates to the work plan and the timeline. So we don't know all of the information, it sounds like, and we are potentially limited to projects in 2025. Is there any leeway in submitting projects late after the work plan is established to potentially get something? And is that something that staff has considered, or is there an option for that?
I think we sit down with you and other coastal member agencies and think through what we'd like to submit in this work plan. They don't necessarily need to be fully funded at this time, but some funding would be helpful so they can be initiated in 2025. And it may be that initiated means submitting your project description to the state. Hopefully we'll have a definition for that soon. But either way, I think we move forward with, we've been working so much in the coastal zone, brainstorming, working with the modelers, looking at fuel models and pathways models and trying to determine what the possibilities are, that I think we have enough information to sit down and come up with some draft proposals that we could then have in place and be ready to move on if it makes sense.
And on schedule. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we've been coordinating with the Coastal Commission for 3 years. We know what they are looking for and what they want to see in the coastal zone. So, and we've been, coordinating with the county development agency. And so we know what they like to see in the coastal zone. And all those things can be incorporated into the work that we do to make sure we're protecting resources in those sensitive areas.
Perfect. Thank you, Ann.
Yeah.
Anything from committee members online or in the room? I think I'll just wrap it up with, when we started this, we have a commitment to ecologically sound practices. We are firmly committed to that. I see this as a way to remove bureaucracy and process, but not weaken our commitment to doing projects with the environment in mind first and foremost, with public safety. So I want to make sure all of our partners out there, understand that. And I think I speak for the group that we're committed. This is about reducing process, maybe some legal fees and some other consulting fees that would be nice to put into other programs within the JPA. So thank you for the update.
Yeah.
Can I just echo that too, Jason? I mean, we wouldn't be here without that group. I mean, they're the ones that helped, through the formation and the support that was required, to get the measure passed. So I echo your comments. Thank you.
When we discussed this item at the exec committee, I read our mission statement. And our mission statement says that we are going to be ecologically sound. And
Yeah.
so we fall back to our DNA, as we said, in the relationships. When we've worked hard to create trust, we're not going to violate that trust.
Affirmative. But it would be nice to get rid of some process. Just saying. Alrighty. On to the work plan development update.
Great. I will share my screen again. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to provide a general update. We have a draft budget here. There we go. And then we'll be going through the JPA-wide proposals. So this is the slide that I always show, and it's very busy, but I like to have it in the slide deck for reference. So we are now in mid-March. So far, we have seen proposals for JPA-wide projects. Those are the ones that affect all the different zones, include the general environmental compliance kind of bucket, fire safe Marin, public education type activities, GIS type activities, etc. So we'll be digging into those a little more today. And then if the committee would like, we could have an ad hoc subcommittee to dive into those further. So that's something that the chair and vice chair can determine. Don't need to decide that today, but it might be good to get that going if you have some thoughts on that. So internally with the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority staff, we submitted JPA-wide proposals after discussing with all of the different related partners around mid-February, and have been working through kind of the budget and refining, and we got the CPI yesterday. And so I'll list those in a moment. The next steps in the process will be to finalize proposals from the different member agencies. So if your member agency hasn't submitted proposals yet for zone-specific projects, please do. We've got a deadline of mid-March. That's just around the corner here for initial drafts, and then trying to finalize and make sure everything's in by the end of March so we can really dig into budget, et cetera. And have this committee review those in detail as well. So the draft overall budget here is, well, we first ran it with a 2% CPI, assuming that's where it was more or less. We're at 2.7%, so we redid the numbers just in the last 24 hours. Looks like overall projected revenue with interest is 22.8 million for next year. Doing the math, 60% of that gives you your core budget, which is 13.7 million. 10% of that is admin, 1.37 million. And then if you take core, take away admin, take away JPA-wide proposals, that gives you 6.5 million. 80% of that, because that's something that we've discussed previously, budgeting to 80% of that and then adjusting later as needed. 80% of that gives you 5.2 million. And then for local and D-space, we no longer have our abatement set aside. So local and D-space are the same, and that's 4.567 million a piece. This is the list of JPA-wide proposals that were submitted. A couple of them are grayed out because they are in the 24-25 plan, but not repeated again in this year, but I wanted to show them to be complete for that budget. So we're going to go through each of these proposals today in different levels of detail because some of them are repeats and you're quite familiar with them already, so we won't go into too great of detail. We see a little bit of an increase, about 600,000 or so, 6.5 increase in budget, and we'll go through where that's coming from and why as we go through. So going back to the overall budget, and that is a typo, it should say 25-26, sorry about that. We'll be distributing these numbers to all of you so you have a better idea of the budget, and 80% of that for each of the zones for corp. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go through the proposals one by one.
And can you bounce
yeah.
back to the last slide?
Yeah.
And it's probably just because I'm not tracking, but core admin, what, why
Core,
12?
sorry, it's a poorly worded math calculation, core minus admin. So our admin costs are covered through the core budget. After you take 60% of the overall revenue, you take 10% of that 60% to cover admin costs.
Tracking now, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and apologies for the 24-25 on there. We edited this last night. Okay, so I think what may make sense for this group, and let me know if you agree, is to go through maybe 3 at a time and then take a quick break to ask any questions that come up so that we're bunching them together. So if that's okay, we'll go through 1, 2, and 3, which are pretty quick. And I'm going to ask Mark to cover operational budget.
Pretty much the same as before. It'll be the rent for Suite 335, which we're in now, Suite 345, some tenant improvements, mostly for enhancing a little bit more of the tech and accessibility here in this room. And our biggest change in operational costs is insurance. We had adequate insurance coverage. However, we don't think the insurance provider knew exactly what they were covering. And if you looked at what we were paying, $7,000 a year for insurance for an organization like ours, they probably didn't quite understand their risk. So we explored insurance options with Bay Cities Joint Powers Insurance Authority and with Special Districts Risk Management Association. And we are going to be joining SDRMA beginning April 1st if their board approves it. And so there's about a $70,000 increase in insurance. But for the purposes of maintaining a sustainable insurance, we think it was a good investment. And Also, with the way the JPA is written, all the liability lands on Marin Wildfire. So we felt that we needed to have some really good insurance. Other than that, we have just some the typical items that we've had on there: maintenance of our website, communications budget. We've decreased that from previous years. Our training budget we've decreased from previous years. Research and development we've decreased from previous years. And part of the JPA says that insurance needs to come from operations, not from admin. So that's why it's in this budget.
Great. All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Work comp we're keeping through our current payroll provider, ADP. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Great. Other questions? Yeah.
It's more of a liability insurance for the work that we do. And that's why Special Districts Risk Management Association was actually a really good fit, because a lot of water agencies fall within them, and the type of work that we are doing is very similar to that. So it'd be liability for any. My biggest fear is our work creates a landslide that takes out some houses, and that would be the type of insurance that we're looking at.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so next, number 2 is environmental compliance. So obviously things have changed a little bit since my original proposal here. We do have some rollovers from last year, made some changes here. It's kind of a big question mark what this is going to look like. There will be some process associated with this new, 1-year suspension of CEQA and Coastal Act. I'm not entirely sure what that's looking like. Some of the smaller projects, we may just file notices of exemption for some of those anyway. Because there is a state of emergency now, we have access to an exemption, an emergency exemption. So that may be a good legal pathway for some of the smaller projects. This is a wild guess at this point, but a significant amount of the environmental budget goes towards supporting projects that are being implemented in the field: nesting bird surveys, botanical surveys, cultural resources surveys, bat surveys, et cetera, et cetera. I took out the item for permitting for work in riparian areas because I assume that's going away. We don't really work in riparian areas anyway, so we'll see. We also have some additional monitoring activities as part of this proposal. When so we typically cover exempt projects through this general environmental compliance budget, and then the CalVTP documents are covered through those project budgets because we don't know, they're a significant budget item. So part of the ongoing support for exempt projects includes some monitoring around LRAD projects in the Southern Marin area. That was part of the discussion when the project was originally approved by the board a couple years ago. So that would include some biologist costs there. We've also been looking at different ecological monitoring options. So that's another line item there for vegetation management work. So, and that includes some coordination with the Fire Foundry for help with some of the monitoring efforts. So the new budget request is very similar to last year's budget request. We do have significant rollover, and it's good to have a buffer in case surprises come up. Number 3 is staffing. So Marin Wildfire originally had proposed 2 vegetation management specialists, which would be partially funded through JPA-wide dollars and then partially funded through project dollars. It became very clear, working with member agencies, that it was challenging to support projects in the field and charge by the hour for different activities and line item, all of that coordination. It also disincentivized asking for help when help was needed to support projects. And we also heard from the Operations Committee Ad Hoc Subcommittee that it would be desirable to move away from that model and move towards a simpler model of a JPA-wide proposal as other positions are funded. through core dollars. So this year we're moving away from that and moving towards this. And I think that'll be a much easier way to coordinate support for projects. Veg management specialists also do a lot of work that is more JPA wide, like the contracting and the GIS work and data collection and monitoring and project planning and environmental compliance and et cetera. Talking to doing public speaking with neighborhood groups, Firewise communities, et cetera. So that's 3. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just see if we have any more questions for the moment.
Any questions online or in the room? I've got a couple. One of them, going back to the environmental compliance piece and the owl monitoring for the
Mhm.
LRADs,
Mm-hmm.
that as an LRAD operator, should that be borne those costs by the agencies that are operating LRADs rather than the JPA wide?
Yeah, that's something that we could discuss. Generally, when we're doing environmental compliance support for exempt projects, we're taking it out of the environmental compliance bucket because we didn't want to disincentivize environmental compliance activities for projects. But that is something that could be discussed. It was part of the project, it was part of the discussion around the project approval by the board of directors originally.
And the question with that, is that one time or do you see that as an ongoing cost?
I see that as short term to see what we find. The concern at the time from the environmental community was that the testing during the nesting season could have impacts to nesting northern spotted owls during a time when they're protected, under the Endangered Species Act, and noise is a particular item that is regulated in terms of northern spotted owl nesting. So there are existing facilities out on the landscape. So part of this work would be to take a look at existing facilities and how they're impacting spotted owl or not.
Gotcha. And then I think my next one was on the VMSs. And I think this is a conversation we started, and I just want to make sure it continues, is pivoting maybe as you pivoted with those positions, but supporting the systems, especially the software systems we have in place that I think, all of us are having to train folks on those, but could one of those be, kind of the liaison to each agency so we don't have to all train folks and keep them updated to attrition? So I just want to keep that front and center as you guys look at those positions. It doesn't change the cost at all, but I think it's duties assigned, I guess.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Just a question with regards to the VIMs, then since they're going to be fully funded out of core, is there a time tracking process that you're going to set up so that we can see how much time they're spending in what zone and what they're doing?
Yeah, if the VMSs are working on a particular project, they do still through our ADP timekeeping, put the project code in, so we'll be able to track those hours.
And Mark, are those VMSs available for local projects as well, as or only core? Local as well. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, one of our VMS is supporting the Muir Beach work. We've got work going on, or that will be going on along Highway 1 on the non-federal side of the road to reduce fuel loading right next to the roadway there for evac route work. So that's going to be going on this year. Great, thank you, Martina.
Mark, I have a question on back to the operations costs. I know we have a $70,000 increase in insurance, but if we look year over year, we only had a $2,000 increase. So what did we cut of 68,000 out of that category?
Yeah, I was making sure my light was green. We cut the communication training and research and development down, and also some of our contingencies.
Okay. And you're comfortable with that?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay. Well, let's head to number 4, and I'm going to ask Mark to.
This one's pretty easy. It's our subscription to Genesis and Ladris AI. It's a decrease from last year because we had some arrears to pay for the change in subscription. And to Jason's point, Ted Briggs, one of our VMSs, is the point of contact for our member agencies for both those products.
And as a reminder to the group, because these names are all muddling, the Ladris or Genesis and Ladris.
Genesis is our evacuation management platform, and Ladris is the artificial intelligence traffic modeling for evacuation. Thank you, Tay.
And the AI subscription piece was about $100,000 a year ad.
Correct. And then fire aside, defensible space inspection, you'll see that there was an increase, but it really isn't an increase. We're moving some of the budgeting from one section to another. The fire aside subscription is 141,000, and the remainder of that is a dynamic risk score that had formerly been in the data and driven wildfire risk framework. But it's more related to our defensible space program, so we moved it out of the data driven and put it into the fire side category.
You. And I'm going to invite Scott Farley to share his screen here. This next item is related to modeling, related to pathways modeling and shaded fuel break risk modeling, etc. Scott, are you there?
Yeah, perfect. I can share as soon as you stop sharing. Perfect. Cool. So hopefully you can see here achievements here in 2024. Looked at scoring just over 300,000 different discoveries on 25,000 different parcels. Created a composite parcel risk score, incorporating a number of different factors, including on-parcel vulnerability, external fire risk factors, fire probability, likelihood the fire is going to get to a particular parcel, as well as starting to look at neighborhood design and features like structure separation distance, which could contribute to structure-to-structure spread. Worked with the ATC working group and member agencies to kind of understand what those opportunities for using data-driven planning are and how they can start to get that into their planning process. Contributed to the board level metrics, 5D and 5E, as well as starting to develop some more tactical metrics that we can use to kind of hone in on agency planning that uses this data to really get the highest return on investment. And then completed an in-depth analysis of what we found from that on-parcel data and what we can see in terms of what residents are actually doing to reduce that risk. So looking ahead to 2025 on the on-parcel front, continuing to support the DSI program with about 30,000 additional on-parcel visits, looking at an updated technical assessment of what are residents doing to reduce this risk and where can we see the biggest improvements, and then working with program staff, member agencies to use this data in a way that they can really dig into, understand, and build programs around. Looking further at this neighborhood level risk scoring approach so we can understand not just at the parcel level and not just from a structure separation distance level, but a sort of a holistic neighborhoods level scoring approach that we can use to highlight particular portions of the community that would benefit best from additional programming. And then a theme here is really leaning into agency-facing decision support dashboards that can expose all of this data modeling and sort of risk assessment in a way that's self-service. A lot of it right now is a very interactive process. So moving that towards a way that agencies can really understand that on their own. So that is the on-parcel risk assessment portion of this. On the vegetation management side of the house, looking at in 2024, having completed a number of different fire behavior analyses kind of throughout the county, fire pathways modeling for over 30 communities in the county, and then starting to use this risk data along with some assessments of feasibility and trade-offs to improve planning in a couple different contexts of potentially upcoming projects that really target those areas that are both high benefit and feasible to work in. Again, contributed here to board level metrics, so 1D and 1E, as well as starting to outline some of those tactical measures that we can use on the vegetation side, guiding member agencies, and again, starting to dig into those dashboards that make this data much more accessible, allow you to download that data and use it, and to understand it in a spatial context. So on this front, looking ahead to 2025, moving from a static understanding of what the landscape is to quarterly updates that include work that has been done through vegetation management projects. As those projects get implemented, update them in the fire behavior models and the fire pathways. Supporting new projects that we may want to do in 2025, and working closely with agency staff to kind of make sure that those metrics are supporting their planning process. Looking at an analysis of road segments so that we can identify areas where there may be a potentially dangerous heat flux during an evacuation. And then finally continuing to improve these dashboards and really make them exactly what the agencies need to do their job efficiently and use these metrics efficiently. So that's what I got for you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So with that, maybe let's hit pause and see if we have any questions.
I just had a question, Scott, with regards to the understanding of the transition of a vegetation fire into structure to structure. How reliable have the models become with the structure to structure transmission? And is it only predicted based on proximity between structures?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a two-part question. One is like, how does it initiate? And do we have models of initiation? And then the second part is, once it's initiated, how confident are we in the ability to like model spread through the built environment? And I think the models are rapidly advancing on both fronts. We've got the pilot with Colorado State that particularly looks at that second part of the question. So that may certainly be part of the how these next level of sort of neighborhood level scores kind of come together. I think structure separation distance is like the number one contributor if you had to rank them, but there may be other contributors that we need to kind of think about in there as well, like presence of large open spaces or other sort of disruptors to fire spread that happen in alignment with the wind. So there's a bit of work to do to kind of integrate what the I guess, to sum it up, there's a bit of work to do to get what the models say at the like sort of the leading science into something that is operationally useful. And so not to simplify it down too much, but create something that is useful from a decision planning process, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I just
go
had a
ahead.
quick, sorry, is my mic on? There it is. I think you were saying there were 30,000 parcels of analysis last year that was done, another 30,000 this year. I was just wondering the total universe of parcels that ultimately this project hopes to get data for, and then how frequently essentially that information needs to be updated to make it useful.
Yeah, for sure. So this total universe would be approximately 87,000 parcels. That's all the sort of inspectable parcels according to sort of the DSI program bounds. So that's the total universe. The like realistic universe is closer to 50,000. But I'll just highlight that we are starting to go back to some of those parcels, as I mentioned earlier, that we've inspected in 22 or 23. And so there's kind of that continuing need to take the data that's coming out of the DSI program, score it so that we can use it in risk assessment. And so I guess there's a continuous update cycle. I'll just highlight when the DSI inspectors go out into the field, the data is updated essentially instantly through some integrations that we have from Fireside. So the data update is very fast. It's just going back to those parcels as part of the DSI program that needs to happen frequently.
Thanks.
I just want to make a comment on your question. to make a distinction. There's the quantity of the evaluation, and then there's the quality. And the distinction there is that, you know, if we're only able to grab a snapshot from a roadside, you know, from the front of the building, although we may say, okay, that's a count, we've got that one completed, that doesn't always translate across into a homeowner, you know, understanding or beginning to do the work on the rest of their property. And I know that we do have a lot of capture on the full 360s, which is good, but I do think that there needs to be some work and ultimate discussion at, say, the ATC level around how to better capture, share, and then have impacts on whatever those noted issues happen to be. And so it's not just a numbers game, I think, at the end of the day. Yeah, and it's like, how do we really get, you know, we just did that campaign about open your report, right? Because they can get a report, but if they don't open it and interact with it, then we don't even know whether or not they've made a change. They might have made changes and never shared those with us too on the other side, right? I mean, there's a bunch of chipper day vegetation stuff that gets reduced that I think is captured and accounted for in terms of volume, but its location and weight as to, you know, the spread to the structures is not defined because it's not captured, right? So there's this whole capture thing that can be improved on over time. And I'm not criticizing us for where we're at right now. I'm just saying there's more that needs to happen there.
And we are at about a 40%, JPA wide, we're at about a 40% rate of all of our inspections being 360s. And when we get into the chipper days, one of the recommendations that we received from San Rafael, and one that we're pursuing with Fireside when it comes to chipper day, is that when the residents report that they've used chipper day, we want it to link back to their DSI report, and then also say what zone they were pulling that material from, so we could start capturing, what's the zone 0 work, what's the zone 1 work.
I have a minor budget question, so not programmatic. Love the program, but want to make sure you guys are getting the money you need. It says Fireside subscription is $155,000 and the parcel risk assessment is $75,000. And so the total is $230,000. So there's about $14,000 missing. So I don't know if that's like, we get like some kind of value discount or something.
We are getting a value discount. However, the overall Fireside is $155,000, but that includes $14,000 for grants module. So we pull the $14,000 for the grants module out of the grants budget. Good eye.
We'll make that clear. Yeah.
Leave it to its city manager to catch that one.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen again. Let's see. We have Megan with Green Info Network also joining us today. We're going to ask her to just talk a little bit about the GIS program, what we've done so far, and what the year ahead will bring. Megan, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. I am going to share my screen here, and Megan's going to let me know when it's time to change the slide.
Okay. Yeah, here's some GIS highlights from last year. As Ann talked about a little bit earlier, a big focus of last year was vegetation management data collection. Over the course of several months, with the GIS data working group met to develop a standardized data format for collecting and reporting on all the vegetation management projects going on. We also collected existing data from the agencies and consolidated it and brought it into the new schema. This data is shared with partners to run, like Scott and Willow Labs, to run the modeling, and also for input into CalMapper. We developed ArcGIS online applications for each of the agencies using the established schema to make it easier for them to collect this data in the field or also do desktop data collection. We developed an interactive project map that highlights the core Measure C funded projects by zone in English and in Spanish. And then we created static poster maps for each of the projects, by the projects by zone, and then also a regional overview, which is the map right there. And you can switch slides. Okay, so next year we will continue to grow the vegetation management database, and we'll also be developing a schema for roadside projects to incorporate that work as well. We are in the process of creating the public-facing Esri-based dashboards and story maps that explain a lot of the modeling and DSI work. And show progress for each of the goals and their associated measures. So right now we're currently working on goal 1 and goal 5. Eventually we should have a dashboard for each of the goals, and when that happens and they're all published, we'll create a central hub site for all these to be in one spot. Finally, we will be providing support in the upcoming CWPP update and continue to provide GIS support to member agencies when needed. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Before we jump ahead, any questions for Megan?
Just on the GIS piece,
Yeah.
I think we need to be focused on a single platform statewide and with the task force piece. So I think, part of that work plan should be that interconnectivity, because people are looking at one map, thinking there's nothing being done in their neighborhood, being redirected to another map where it may be. So want to put that on everybody's radar. And then also making sure that, like for the CalMapper load, meeting with Gavin the other day, it sounds like a whole bunch of work is having to be done with those shape files to get them to load. So again, my direction to Gavin was make sure you're working with their team. So we're not doubling up on work, but I just highlight those 2 items.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Definitely on our radar. Megan, do you want to add any additional thoughts or any responses there? Or are we good?
For the CalMapper work, I think this initial upload, because a lot of the data hadn't been uploaded prior to having the data collected, this initial upload will be the hardest, and then going forward, it should be pretty streamlined.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Next on the list is Regional Wildfire Disaster Preparedness Coordination.
2 years ago, this was actually a position that was funded at Southern Marin Fire. We've pivoted. It's no longer a position at Southern Marin Fire, but it's services coordination when in the disaster preparedness on the wildfire aspect of disaster preparedness through the County Office of Emergency Management. And we've been seeing, this year we are the same as last year, but previous years we've seen a decrease, and we'll see some decreases in the future.
Great. Thanks so much. And then next we're going to talk about the CHIPPR program, and I have a couple slides here to share. Go ahead, Stephen.
All righty. Yep. All right, we're on. Morning, everyone. I'll be pretty brief. The CHIPPR program continues to be a avenue for residents to create their own defensible space and do defensible space work, and reduce the costs and logistics around getting vegetation out of their properties. Since 2020, when the program started, we've been able to remove well over 69,000 cubic yards of material between just under 19,000 pickups. Last year, just as Ann said earlier, we did about 4,700 pickups, removing 15,000 cubic yards. Looking forward to the 2025 season, we are going to continue the rotating around the MWPA zone approach to the schedule. We're again looking to do about 30 weeks of chipping, starting in April, going through to November. And really, we're thinking that the structure of the program is really hitting its stride and going to continue on as we have. I think that's, and to that point, we're not asking for any budget increase for the program's funds.
And what we'll do at the end of fiscal year 24-25, any unspent from 24-25 CHIPPR Day will be pushed back out to each of the zones, prorated to your revenue percentages.
I just have a quick question. So last year, we had a lot of discussion around the expansion of this program and increased the budget by 20% when compared to the year prior. So I was just wanting to see, Stephen, if you have an update on like is there an increase in usage? What was that percentage?
Yeah, so I believe the exact numbers on the annual report, but off the top of my head, I believe we saw about a 4% increase in number of pickups. I know we also saw an increase in the cubic yards removed. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that.
Awesome, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Anything else for Stephen? Awesome. Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
This isn't for Stephen, but thank you for the report. This is just a question about the previous item, the Regional Wildfire Disaster Preparedness Coordination. So, Mark, how does, all the towns and the cities provide funding to the organization? How is this different from that funding?
So Ready Marin is, a lot of the money for this does support Ready Marin, but Ready Marin is more than the wildfire. So what the towns and the cities are contributing to Ready Marin is for the all hazards, whereas Ready Marin also has a wildfire side. So this is contributing to the wildfire side of that, the disaster coordination. Also the wildfire related disaster coordination with CERTs and neighborhood response groups.
So if not for this funding, we wouldn't be getting the wildfire aspect?
We're able to amplify the wildfire aspect.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right. Shall we move on?
Actually, now I want to follow up on Krista's comments.
Okay.
I do think I know from other organizations dealing with taxpayer groups are increasingly asking if you're supplanting costs with pots like this. I think you should be really careful and really document why that's not supplanting OEM's costs that they should be getting from somewhere else. It shouldn't be that this is a way to send 65,000 in their budget. You really need to define what you're buying up that they otherwise wouldn't do.
Thank you. And for clarity on that, this position wouldn't exist in OEM if it wasn't funded from those sources.
I totally agree.
Document
I'm
it.
in two other organizations where taxpayer groups are hammering on this point of, are you just moving money around? So.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Now I'd like to ask Fire Safe Marin to come up and talk about the next item, wildfire education services and resources. So we're joined by Meg and Jen, who I'm going to ask to share their screen. Can you bring me in?
There we go. Good morning, everyone, Operations Committee and members of the public. My name is Jen Gauna, and I'm one of the co-directors at Fire Safe Marin with Meg McCabe. We're very glad to be here today to deliver our proposal for public education and outreach. As you all know, Fire Safe Marin has been serving as the primary source for publicly funded public education and outreach, and that public education outreach is one of the main pillars of the Marin Wildfire. I know you all are very, very familiar with Fire Safe Marin. We've been around for over 30 years, and we enjoy an excellent reputation, national recognition, and cited as one of the most trusted sources of information for wildfire preparedness and prevention. And it's largely due to the people that are around this table and other Marin wildfire committees and beyond. We are very well positioned to deliver the public education and outreach. Our programming is tightly aligned across the board with Marin Wildfire's goals and objectives. We are data driven, and we are increasingly using leveraging, AI to enhance our workflow efficiencies. Our plan addresses two primary goals next year. One is action, empowering residents to take action, and then two, building trust and awareness of the Marin wildfire, which will become increasingly important as you head into renewals in the next few years. So wildfire is at the forefront of residents' concerns at this moment, more so than at any other moment since 2017 and 2018. It's increasingly clear that the built environment needs to change and that residents are the key stakeholders to make changes in reducing risk in those environments. And it's increasingly clear to us that we have a very significant challenge in getting residents to take some action. In a lot of the information that's been coming out from the LA findings, they cite examples of small actions by residents that have made an example. This is very, very hopeful and is part of our planning and driving action. So our plan drives action among residents. It recognizes that we need large-scale participation by residents, and it is responding immediately to needs in 6 areas. These 6 areas include increasing support for Marin wildfire programs and member agencies and communications. This is increasing and meeting the need of residents who need information, guidance, affordable solutions to make these changes. It is expanding a trained workforce to meet the demand of the requests that we're seeing from residents to who can do this work. It enhances our support of the Firewise communities so that they're implementing changes in the highest risk areas. It is responding to the needs of the community partners and member agency programs and projects, building support now for the Zone 0 ordinances, and then lastly, meeting the needs of the media and public forums. So I'd like to point out that these are all immediate needs now that sit on top of the regular work of public education outreach that is happening day in and day out through programs like social media, newsletter, and website. And so with these increasing needs, there is a need for greater capacity. And the proposed request for the budget for next year is $1,278,000. So if we look at what those deliverables look like, I know that you're all very familiar with the work that we do. I would like to call out 4 different areas here that underscore the efficiencies and values that Fire Safe Marin brings that are just not super, that are very important. So number 1 is the Community Ambassador Program. So these are the in-person events. In the 2.5 years that we started this program, Fire Safe Marin has attended through our trained network of ambassadors 100 events engaging with 20,000 residents. These are two-way discussions, so they're high quality. This is also important. These are new audiences. We're putting ourselves in the space where people are living their lives. Number 2 is the website maintenance. It's very similar to the Golden Gate Bridge in that it needs repairs, maintenance, and it takes time to incorporate the latest science and research into the educational content that we have. And since the inception of Measure C, we've seen nearly 1 million visitors to Fire Safe Marin's website. The third item is the video and media production. Over the last 5 years, we have developed systems and processes that allow us to be very nimble, allow for efficiencies and cost efficiencies in developing videos. And from start to finish, the speed at which we can do it and be nimble and be responsive is very significant. Number 4 is the response to public inquiry. So we're taking telephone calls and emails every day, and this does reduce the load of work on member agencies. I'd like to draw your attention to the budget. We think of our budget in 4 big buckets. 1 is the production. This is what it costs to create videos, graphics, public education materials. So think about the graphic designer, think about the videographer. These costs have increased. We're projecting these costs will increase next year. Distribution, how do we get this message out? That's largely advertising. Implementation, this is implementing these deliverables, which takes capacity and staff and workers to do that work. And then operations will be things like subscriptions, our storage unit, and things like that, website administration, et cetera. And the other item on the budget is that last year, I think we asked for a reduction of 5% in our budget, and we over-delivered on what we said we would deliver. And so again, the proposed budget request is $1,278,000. Last point is the budget last year accounted for 2 full-time people and 4 part-time people. This next year is projected to 5 full-time and 1 part-time person. And so that concludes my presentation, but I'd also welcome questions that Meg and I can answer.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's
Thanks.
take a moment.
I don't have a question, but a comment. I think that we could not do what you're doing without a private partner and a nonprofit. And, I think there's enormous value. And a lot of those costs, minus the personnel, would be borne by the agency if they took on that. But, I know at least for our organization, we direct everyone to Fire Safe Marin for the public education outreach. It's created consistency across the county with the agency. So I'm fully supportive of the increase.
Not a criticism, more of a budgeting question. There are other write-ups in this packet that reference Fire Safe Marin. Confusing to me if they're getting more money than that proposal. Are we paying them for other things that are in these other budget items? And if so, are we really reporting out how much we're giving? So, for example, the next, it reads as if giving money to Fire Safe Marin outside of this contract for Ember Stomp. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's not very clean budgeting or transparency if Fire Safe Marin's actual annual take of the taxpayer money is higher than this ask in this line item.
And if we want to skip ahead to the Ember Stomp, because there's that direct connection, I can easily do that. Unless there's other people that have questions for the Fire Safe Marin proposal. Because I am going to address exactly what you're talking about.
I just have a comment too. I mean, I've been a member of Fire Safe Marin since my early career, attending meetings and watched the evolution of the group as it's continually tried to position itself to address, prevention and mitigation in the wildfire areas. And I find the work that you do now to be so incredibly professional. And I know that you participate also regularly with other fire councils throughout the state. And the reporting out that you do and the positioning is so far exceeds what is happening in other fire safe councils. You would be amazed at how far and how well positioned this group has become. And so I just wanted to thank you for that and note that.
Thanks, Bill. And I just want to add that all of this work that we've been doing over the past 5 years and the 25 years before that with the website and all the resources that have been built, we're really well poised at this moment to step up and do what is needed to make to engage the residents in doing the work that we need for them to do on their private properties. We cannot achieve the goals of vegetation management and protecting the built environment without them. And so it has been a really well orchestrated and collaborative effort to build this huge array of programs that you just saw Jen put up on the screen there. And it's recognized not only in this county, but as was just referred to, all around fire-prone areas everywhere. So I think it's just part of the leadership of Marin Wildfire and Marin County in general to really support Fire Safe Marin and give us the capacity we need to be able to deliver the programs that we have ready. And we just need the support to be able to actually do the job that we're set to do.
I just have a quick question. Also, thank you both for being here today. It's good to see you, and thank you for the work that you continue to do with, I think, carrying the message for the great work of Marin Wildfire. As it relates to your budget, I understand that you kind of operate with the four buckets, but when you're proposing a 30% increase compared to the year prior, I think what would be helpful for me, and I think maybe others in the room, is just maybe a little more specificity in what the budget is. So like, what are the parameters or the assumptions that you're making that are going into those figures for production, for distribution, implementation, so on and so forth. how many videos is that going to equate to? What does that mean in terms of advertising buys? I think having just a little more context to what that is would be, I think, a lot more. It would be very helpful for me, and I'm sure others here as well.
We can certainly provide that. The reason we have always, at a very high level, given the budget, is that we, as an independent, not-for-profit, we're contracted with Marin Wildfire to provide the goods and services as a package. And it doesn't really equate to this video costs this much, because there's a synergy among all the resources and how we deliver programs. For instance, if we're creating a workers training program that I'm just embarking with Steve Quarles, there is components of almost every piece on that of the budget that you just saw. There's video production, there is graphic design, there is administrative costs, there's hours and hours of script writing and so forth like this. So it's really hard to explain our budget in a line item way to really get across the efficiencies that we do when we bring it all together.
Totally.
And that's why we present it in this kind of broad strokes way, because it's really, we're not able to pull that apart and say, we're going to need this much for ad distribution, because the ad distribution actually feeds the social media, because we create the assets for both. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I think I would just maybe challenge on the notion, there must have been some sort of assumption to go into how you arrived at a 1.278 figure. And so I'm just trying to get
Largely,
is it just like,
largely it's based on the cost of the people to do the work. And this comes down to Jen and I, and last July, we were the only full-time people there. I mean, it's just doing a tremendous load of work. We lost Rich, who retired last year. And so we have really picked that up in terms of just working extra hours. And so we have our part-time admin person needs to go up to full-time. And so does the Firewise leader. And we have a third person that we just recently promoted to full-time person. And we're looking for another person to end our leadership team. So that's the capacity that we need to do this work. And that's really where the bulk of the budget goes into, and that is the third increase.
okay, I think I'd still like to see maybe some greater detail as it relates to that.
Conversation, because you're operating as a quasi-government entity, even though you're a nonprofit, and now you're saying, well, we're making our own judgments that you really shouldn't interfere with out of how many staff people you have, and you should just absorb that cost in what is a $0 zero-sum budgeting game for us. We're not engaged enough. I don't know how much Mark is on the level of your operations. Every I add more staff people is a dollar that's not their program. These are not doing. These are not criticisms, and in this room by asking these questions is questioning the value. But we are, particularly those of us on the city manager side, we do this and we don't have conversations you just did, because you, even though you're a nonprofit, like start asking, well, what are we much of an increase?
I wanted to just mention you're asking like sort of numbers of videos and, that sort of stuff. Those details are provided in the annual reports that they do. And those are online also. I would encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to see it, or if your staff hasn't pushed it up to you, take a look at it, because it's impressive. Given the fact that they just have 2 full-time people.
Totally.
doing
And
all the
again,
work.
I think just echoing what Dan said, it's not a value judgment by any means, but rather just like from a budgeting perspective, to get just 4 broad buckets and not have more specificity around what that is just a little, like, I would like to see more. That's all I'm asking.
And I would say I'm happy to jump in and help with this because I think I've worked for enough city managers. I know what you guys are looking for. And when you go ask for things, you've got to have detail behind it. So I'm happy to work with Fire Safe Marin before the next meeting to deliver
Yeah,
that.
it's just, it probably warrants a discussion about a different level of engagement given what Fire Safe Marin is doing. But essentially you're mixing vendor language with staffing language, and those are very different things. And if the contract is to deliver vendor product or output, you're supposed to just have the vendor pitch, I'm going to deliver this and I need this much money. And then the question of why is it going up 30% is the negotiation. We don't have that relationship. That's why that doesn't work. And I totally understand that. We have a different type of relationship. This isn't entirely a vendor relationship. But you can't have a mixed messages at the budget meeting. So I do think there needs to be something changed so that we're all empowered to tell the board this increase makes a lot of sense to us. And it's hard when it's your favorite partner. I'm not, again, like, I'm not trying to criticize, but, and Mark, Sean's like me, we sit there and go, wait a minute, I can't articulate this. And if I can't articulate this, I'm not comfortable. So, and that leads to my other question. We have a vendor that I think is sprinkled in other parts of the budget. And I want to hear about that because ultimately we may want a different budgetary relationship with Fire Safe Marin that's a little easier to follow.
Yeah, you bet. And I do want to point out that this is the first year that they've asked for an increase. All the previous years, they've either maintained or they've decreased funding. So over this is our 6th work plan. So this is the first time that they are asking for an increase in funding. As far as sprinkling in other areas, and we'll jump ahead to the.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
About, my comment is that currently we are under contract with Marin Wildfire to deliver the deliverables that I had put up on the board. And in the past, the relationship has been, this is what it's going to cost to deliver these educational products. And we haven't gotten into the details in the past. And so I just wanted to point out that we are currently under contract as a vendor to deliver the public education.
Before we move on, Mark, can I just, because I understand, I believe where Dan and John are coming from. What's the total budget of Fire Safe Marin?
Budget is $975,000.
No. Your organization wide, your total annual operating budget for Fire Safe Marin.
It is
1.5 total.
to get you the exact number, but around that, yes.
Okay.
That's an attorney's grade.
Okay. So of which is significantly funded through this organization. I think to some of their points and maybe where John was going with the 30% increase, and you can't answer this, and I appreciate Chief Weber for saying, but are there additional deliverables that are coming with that? And what are those additional deliverables that are going to benefit this group and, the constituents that we serve? Would be helpful information as we kind of move down the line. Well, hold on one sec. And then given that MWPA is such a large percentage of your overall total budget, what happens if MWPA doesn't get renewed? I get a little bit concerned about your sustainability in the long term, and I'm kind of curious as to what the other funding sources are for Fire Safe Marin.
Sure. The answer to the first question. I'm not paying attention.
Thank you, by the way.
Oh, sure. So the first answer to the first question is within the presentation, the additional needs that I outlined, the 6 of them that are immediate needs now that we are meeting, and we are working beyond capacity to meet those needs that the organization has, that residents needs. They need more guidance. They need support. We're working on that immediately now. So that's in addition to what we're currently doing with the deliverables at the end, from the website, social media, newsletter, in-person events, the website, video creations, the advertising, the support for FireWise leaders. That stuff we're doing regularly. In addition to the need for greater capacity comes from the needs of the moment, where we are getting requests daily to do more projects with member agencies. We're getting requests to show up in the community to do presentations. Our phones are ringing off the hook to answer resident questions. And these aren't easy questions. These are questions like that are nuanced, they're specific. They actually need technical skill set, and we have that available to us. It's working with a lot of the partnerships to advance their objectives. So, for example, schools. We're working with Mill Valley right now. They're trying to resurrect school programs in high schools, and that's a new thing that we didn't plan for last year. So we are trying very hard to say yes and to work with everyone who has a need for wildfire preparedness and prevention. And right now, it's on everybody's mind. And so, and I know you guys are all stretched to capacity as well. So that's first, and then I think you have a second one.
That comment underscores the concern. So you don't work for the organization, but you're making commitments to the community that are ultimately going to tap the organization's budget. So there, again, I'm not being critical. I want you to keep doing this work. I just think the entire relationship has to be thought through. We have evolved. You are a grown-up organization now. You were in mom and pop before. If you're going to act like a grown-up organization, and you're pretty much going to need to tell the taxpayers why they have to renew the tax so you can keep working, we probably have to have a different type of partnership than we do now, because at some point, because this is a zero-sum budget operation, somebody on this side of the house has to be able to say, I'm sorry, I wanted you to do that work, but maybe we have to say no, or we have to delay it for a year because there's something else in the budget mix. And that's not happening if we don't have some level of engagement with you where we're controlling your scope of work.
If I may, I think the point is we have some work to do before the next meeting. I see where you're headed. I don't disagree. We've had this conversation since the beginning about the relationship contractual piece. You know, I think there's a lot of pressure going on Fire Safe Marin right now from the fire chiefs, especially because of the need to communicate, the need to be in every single household. We know we've got to create, you know, zone zero. We have a lot of work to do on the public education and outreach piece. So I think as time allows, let us get offline, work through these things. I'm hearing you loud and clear. I understand where this is coming from and the need. And I think we do have to assess, you know, what is that relationship, you know, contractually or otherwise, clearly defined. And I think that's something we can do. It'll be good for all of us.
And I want to emphasize, I think a positive outcome is telling the taxpayers, this is a wonderful operation that can only exist if this tax exists. I think that's actually a positive way to go. I just think that probably means we have to rethink how these two organizations are intertwined.
Yeah, agree.
I'd like to propose, you know, I think the chair and vice chair can choose an ad hoc subcommittee. Doesn't have to happen during this meeting, but after this meeting could.
I volunteer John because he asked the question first.
So this is just the kind of topic and just the kind of venue where we can dig into that with more details and invite Jen and Meg to provide more information and ask lots of questions. So
I would ask if you're interested in working on this offline. Maybe
Yes.
John and I look like we're interested.
Yeah.
Vice chair, yeah. So we'll jump in. I think this is a good discussion, good dialogue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd just end
absolutely.
it, Chief, too. I mean, I spent a lot of years managing a nonprofit, so I understand your challenges. And I don't necessarily expect that, okay, it's a 30% increase, so you're having a 30% additional deliverable. I recognize that Fire Safe Marin has grown and evolved a lot, and you took on some large kind of chunks of work with those initial proposals. And I don't think it's wrong to say we underestimated the cost and resources needed to do those proposals. I don't expect you to say, I have, you know, 303,000 of additional deliverable that is beyond what we've delivered in the past. So I think those are important things to kind of keep in mind as your organization is growing and evolving and figuring these things out. You're doing work that really hasn't been done. And so you're making your best guess that this is what it's going to cost us to do this work for you. And now, you know, to come back and say it costs more to do the work than we initially envisioned is an okay argument to to make. So, and you're growing, and there's more work to be done as well. It's an okay argument to make. So,
Yeah, and I think we need to help you by maybe doing some coordination on our side of how they get asked to do work. I mean, what I'm hearing is everybody gets to ask them to do work without much coordination from us, and we're the main funder of the organization. So I think we have some responsibility on our side as well.
I just want to thank everybody here. I think this is a really healthy discussion, and I look forward to figuring out how to clarify the relationship between Fire Safe Marin and Marin Wildfire, because clearly we are, wonderful partners. And I think we all really have these a good eye on the ball about what we want to accomplish in the next year and beyond. And so I look forward to working together with the committee and defining it more clearly so that we can all articulate it to all the people that need to know. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. So I think we can be confident that we'll revisit this topic in an ad hoc subcommittee meeting, and we'll have other discussions on other proposals in that setting as well. Want to share my screen here and get to the second item that is related to Fire Safe Marin, and Mark's going to speak to this.
So Dan, you're exactly right. Fire Safe Marin is integral in Amber Stomp. The way Amber Stomp has rolled out in the past, the funding that we provided for Fire Safe Marin provided for the staff time that they put towards Amber Stomp, but they also did significant fundraising through philanthropic organizations and then also reaching back out to the member agencies for funding. And I was actually challenged a few times from members of this committee, specifically those two guys right there, why exactly are we forcing Fire Safe Marin to go get the philanthropic dollars when perhaps Marin Wildfire should be just funding it? We wanted to keep it separate from the Fire Safe Marin overall budget because we are going to continue to look for philanthropic, and whatever we don't get from the philanthropic, the 150 will cover. If we don't expend that 150, then we will push it right back out. But what that 150 is funding is Red Barn Productions, which is the lead organization that we are working with to put it on, the rent, the facilities, all that goes into hosting that. And it's been running about $150,000. That has not been tapped into Marin Wildfire budget, except for we've been asking member agencies for contributions, and most of them have been using Measure C funding for those contributions. So this year, we're looking at having this budget center still go author the philanthropic, but then not go back to the member agencies asking for contributions.
Yes, I only asked that question because, and maybe it's more of an audit question than a budget question, but there's lots of little additional pockets of money in the budget that are being set aside for a contractual relationship. At some point, there should be a summary of what the grand total is of what is going to one entity.
Except this Amber Stomp money does not go to to Fire Safe Marin.
That was my question.
Right. It's
right?
not going
So
to Fire Safe Marin. It's going to Red Barn. It's going to the other, the rent for the fairground, so on and so
Okay.
forth.
It just wasn't clear because
Yeah.
Fire Safe Marin gets mentioned a lot
Yep.
in a lot of these write-ups, and then it gets a little fuzzy
Yeah.
about
So the
what's
150
going
would, none of that 150 ends up going into Fire Safe Marin's budget. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And then the next one is the, oh, I'm
stand by.
sorry.
Krista.
Through the chair, thank you, Mark, for that. And so what I heard you just say is that you're not going to be, or no one is going to be hitting up the local towns and cities for money at the last minute for Ember Stop?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. I don't like that. I don't, we get in Ross $60,000 from our local funds. Grateful for it. We got a lot to work to do. We're in the middle of a forest. And I don't like being that we are portrayed like we're not a team player, because that's not the only thing that we're getting hit up to use, kind of like this, oh, well, you just use your local funds. We have real needs for our local funds, and Ross Valley Fire is doing a good job of helping us clear for roadside clearance and some other things. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
You bet. Ready for the CWPP? So the last CWPP we published was in 2020, and the previous one was 2016. What I like to point out when it comes to the CWPPs, no fire department or town or city in Marin has ever put a penny towards the CWPPs in the past. It's always been grant funded, with County Fire being the lead agency taking the grant. With Marin Wildfire stepping in, it was always part of the vision that we would start taking the lead for the development of the CWPP once we came in place. It's time for a renew of the CWPP. Currently, it is a snapshot in time for 2019, even though we published in 2020. The CWPP that we're looking at developing will be a very dynamic CWPP using the latest science technology. And then as data is updated through our work, then the analysis will automatically be updated. That's how we're designing this CWPP. We put out an RFP. We had a respondent of a team of contractors. And one of the things that we put in the requirements was that we needed whoever responded to the RFP to integrate seamlessly into the data structure that we've already established and not create a new data structure, and then create a sustainable method for our member agencies to be able to push the data back into the CWPP without maintaining that contractor relationship through the life of the CWPP. So they're going to create, within the framework that we already have, a CWPP that's dynamic, moving on forward. We are exploring 2 different grant options right now, one federal, one state grant option for obvious reasons. And if we are able to cover the entire cost for the CWPP, then that $300,000 will get pushed back into the zones prorated to their percentages.
Would you like to continue?
Sure. We wanted just to, this is a $0 proposal. We just wanted to have it highlighted in our work plan that Marin Wildfire will be in a support and coordination role when it comes to the Zone 0 ordinance implementation or efforts.
Well, great. Thanks so much. Let's jump into our last item today, and I'm going to invite Josh Hampshire to join us and share his screen. He's going to just give you a brief overview of the grants program and some thoughts about next year.
Hi all, sharing my screen really quick. Everybody see that okay?
Yes, thanks, Josh.
Okay. So this is going to be a quick overview of this year's grant program and how we're changing it for next year, to fiscal year 25-26. A lot of these guidelines, really, none of them have been discussed with the ATC or any member agency staff, and that was an extensive process in the development of the 24-25 guidelines and will be for 25-26. So this is all Marin Wildfire's proposal, but has not been discussed with all the other decision makers at play. Just wanted to keep that in mind as we go through this. So the 24-25 grant process and guidelines, this was intended as a transition year. The program is designed first come, first served. That's how it's been since we started the program back in, I believe, fiscal year 22-23. There's 2 funding rounds. The first was in July, and then the second was in October. Really quick, just want to say something about that October funding round. The program's gotten so popular that the applications that were reserved for that funding round were essentially, spoken for within an hour of the funding round opening. The awards are limited to vegetation in zone 0 and 1, gutter guards, and vents and fences. So that's a significant reduction from the selection of items that people could apply for in previous grant program. No match $2,500 awards, no access and functional needs requirements, retroactive work up to a year so people could apply for work that they've already done. A full inspection is required. It doesn't matter when, and it's a pre-approval grant. So people could apply before putting down their own money and receive that assurance that they would be reimbursed before paying contractors. Some successes from this model: 348 applications awarded or approved at about $1,900 per application, though, you know, we're still, as Ann said in the beginning, working with residents to finish out their application. So this is likely to change a little bit before the end of the fiscal year. Due to demand, only able to keep that application over for a little over 1 month between both application rounds. The first in July was open for about a month, and then the second one in October. Penetration awareness had gotten to the point where we just had a influx of applications at 8 a.m. when it opened that day. Work is more focused on vegetative hazards, more people replacing their combustible fencing, which was a high priority item that we did not really see in past years. So that was definitely a benefit of restricting the selection of items to a few high priority ones. Those without financial security appreciated the pre-approval. Like I said before, they'd have that reassurance before putting down their own money. And then instructional videos have been helpful in reducing the system frustration and support requests. So that's something that we implemented about mid-year with just a lot of the same requests. And it's kind of difficult to navigate people through the online platform with just words alone. So the instructional videos have been very helpful. Quick comparison of the distribution by cost between 23-24 and 24-25, just to see what the impact these changes had this year. As you know, we consolidated the program around a few high priority items, but we also in the process cut out a few important items. And so, you know, we definitely, I think, increased the risk reduction per dollar spent this year, though we still have to do the analysis there. That's just my hypothesis. This year, I'd like to, you know, reintroduce complexity, but using the data and tools that we've developed over the last year to do so in a way that further increases that risk reduction per dollar spent. Challenges and proposed solutions for 2025-26. So on the left here, we've got the challenges. These are all the primary challenges. There's a lot of smaller kind of like sub challenges within that, but just overarching, the bias towards young and tech savvy applicants rather than fire risk and need. You know, online application for some first come, first served. So changing that for fiscal year 25-26 to be award by score, not by first come, first serve. That's a big change from the design of our programs in past years. There's a couple other programs in various other counties or jurisdictions that have tried a more like rubric-based model, so it's not unprecedented, and it appears to be pretty successful, though we still have to design how that would work. We would advocate for spring prep work, we advocate for spring prep work, but we do not have grants available at that time. The solution to this would be an earlier start with defensible space inspections around May. Too many applicants flooding the system as soon as the application opens. Like I said, you know, applications were spoken for within an hour for that second funding round, and that goes back to number one. It you know, there's a bias towards younger applicants and those who can navigate the application online a little bit easier. Whoops. Oh, hold on. Where was I? Penalizes working folks and puts burden on dispensable space program for reinspection. So this is in reference to the fact that they require a full inspection in order to apply. And so proposing for this year that we no longer require full inspection and you know, augmenting that loss of data that accompanies their application through that rubric-based system. And then lastly, not a need-based program. The 24-25 program was not a need-based program. And that one, you know, awards don't necessarily go towards those who need it most financially. But two, that also creates this double taxation issue that we're able to do away with if we implement any sort of income threshold that will qualify the grant awards for the general welfare exclusion, and we won't have to issue 1099s, and this tax revenue is not going to be going towards federal and state income tax. A few other considerations. These are large changes to the grant program, and with that, we're going to need some extensive preseason outreach to communicate these changes as clearly as possible. A large amount of frustration every year comes from the fact that residents will plan work based off of the last program, the one that they're familiar with, and so really getting in front of that this year is going to be important. Instructional videos, like I said, are very helpful and will be a part of this rather than extensive written guidelines, which nobody are hard to get through, hard to understand, and typically people don't read them fully. Possibly a webinar where potential applicants can ask questions, and then we'll post that with all the other information on the grant program. And then also centering the message for agency staff around Fireside account creation rather than a 6-digit access code. This just resolves some more technical issues, but also frustration from member agency staff is that they don't know what to tell their residents because it's shifting so fast. So this just kind of simplifies the message. If we can get people to the grants tab of their report, then they'll get the information that they need there. Now to the direct assistance program. Quick overview. This is kind of a 3-step process. First, we send out letters or emails or call residents that we've selected in partnership with local fire departments based off of fire risk. They will elect based off that invitation whether they want to be a part of the program, and if so, they'll reach back out. We'll schedule a scope of work inspection, which is uses the same software as the defensible space inspections, and get the crews out there to do the work. Some accomplishments: the system and process, it took a bit to set up, but I think it's very effective now, the way that we can turn a defensible space inspection into a right of entry and a scope of work for the contractor with a few clicks. We've identified 246 candidates and counting, contacted 164 of these, completed 14 projects, and 20 are in progress. So either they've had their right of entry inspection or that's scheduled. Some challenges: the learning curve, like I said, took a bit to develop the process and tools to go with this program, but I think that those are pretty effective now. And then expectations of contractors, just having contractors understand the goals of this program and what's expected of them. And the solution there, I mean, we're on the other side of that learning curve. We've come a long way since July. And then the main challenge here is staff capacity limitations, and we're building in some more support and redundancy into the program for fiscal year 25-26. And that is the end of my slides. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks so much, Josh. And the intention here is to start meeting with ATC members in the next couple of weeks and dive into the details of these ideas and proposed changes and get feedback, and then come back to this group with additional detail, maybe in the ad hoc subcommittee, about what next year might look like. Thanks, Josh. Ultimately, the dollar figure that's proposed is the same as last year.
Thank you. Forgot to clarify that.
All right. So that's it for the JPA-wide proposals. We're running low on time, so we may want to direct additional discussion to the ad hoc subcommittee, or we
I would
could
just say,
take
if
some
you're
additional
interested
questions
in
now.
participating in those conversations, send Ann and I an email. We'll, we obviously can't have a full quorum, but we can get that started ASAP and work through that piece. And then if there's no other discussion, we'll move on.
That's great. Thank you.
And sir, I see no hands at this time from the public or in the room.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. So the next item on the agenda is our placeholder item to discuss any updates or issues around the LRA map updates and Zone 0 regulations. We are short on time, but we'll continue to have this on the agenda if there's anything that needs to be discussed or shared with the group.
Yeah, I think agencies will start circulating resolutions for adoption. It's got to be 120 days from the February 24th date, I believe. So a fire chief near you should be discussing that. And as for Zone 0, I think the state has not come out yet with any statewide ordinance. There was a webinar the other day that a lot of folks attended. And I think it's still our intention to bring ordinances forward, probably as part of the code adoption this year. And we'll keep everybody updated as that continues.
Great. Okay.
I'm just wondering whether there's any effort at having a standardized presentation format for agencies. I know we've already done a presentation to our board. We're scheduling one for the city council since, I've been a little out of the loop. This is more of what the prevention staff has been doing, but I'm just wondering if you've heard whether or not there's a standardized kind of way that people are trying to tell the stories of the maps.
I have not heard.
Because comments in the IGA were just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I don't think there's a standardized format, but
No, the prevention group has been working together. We actually proposed and did our first read last night of the ordinance and the maps and everything. So there is a template out there that I'm sure they're sharing amongst the prevention group that's, basically following kind of the state guidance. So we've already started the process.
Okay.
I just signed the letter this morning to send it over to the board. So I think check with your fire chief, but the FPOs can share the information. Alrighty, moving on to committee reports. Technical advisory. I see Todd. Go ahead. Caller, you're on the air.
Perfect. Just unmuted myself. Thanks, everybody. I'll be giving a report on the advisory technical committee today. Chief Hilliard from Southern Marin Fire could not be here. I'm the co-chair. He serves as the chair. So I'll start out just by saying that I'm going to try to keep this to about a minute and a half, or just a quick update. No, we're not working on anything particularly surprising to all you folks, but we have met twice in 2025 now, in February and early March. So I'll note that we've made a couple minor changes to how the ATC operates. This is beyond just the fact that we are no longer considered a Brown Act committee, which was helpful to our coordination. But we've restructured the meeting format so that we could focus more on the technical discussions, less on receiving reports from MWPA staff, since we receive those types of reports continually, and most of the projects that MWPA reports back to us are projects that our members are already working on. So we feel that these meetings are best spent discussing the technical issues that can help advise the operations committee. That change allows us to use our time more effectively, and it's going to really help us focus on real technical input with the expertise of the committee members. And we're hoping that that will help make the committee a little more impactful, direct discussions on specific operational and technical challenges that our projects are facing. So we've been working on several items, the defensible space and home hardening programs, coordinated across all of the MWPA member agencies. We're refining the Zone Zero implementation strategies. And we're preparing, as all the agencies are preparing, to adopt or adapt to state mandated compliance requirements for Zone Zero. So we're working with the fire prevention officers, both through our direct membership and coordination between jurisdictions on standardizing defensible space inspections across all the MWPA agencies. Most of us are now working together. The majority are working together through the Defensible Space Alliance, and we're coordinating with the agencies that operate on their own to standardize defensible space inspections and all the homeowner guidance that's provided by Fire Safe Marin and the DSI app and our individual agencies. The number of evacuation and risk assessment initiatives being worked on at MWPA. So we're reviewing the evacuation route improvements that are happening within our jurisdictions. I've had some opportunities to speak to the risk modeling that's been conducted by MWPA and hope that our advice can better support community planning efforts. But we have had some opportunities to discuss and provide advice on GIS mapping efforts. They're currently being expanded, looking at integrating updated fire behavior models, including the work that's being done, by MWPA, by Willow Labs, and our individual agencies So hope to continue to provide technical expertise as those models are updated. And expertise on how the models and the information, the data that's collected and generated through them is applied in the community. Vegetation management, fuel reduction projects. We've been providing input on all of the high priority fuel treatment areas. And the hope is that our input will ensure risk reduction projects are effective and environmentally compliant, especially given the recent changes that we anticipate related to the governor's executive order. It's important that we continue to meet the MWPA's goals for environmental compliance and environmentally sensitive practices. We're working with all the local agencies, most of them represented on our committee, but to address the LRA map changes, the potential impacts to the Zone 0 regulations. That's also being worked on concurrently by the fire prevention officers in the county, and we expect local ordinances to be adopted this year in advance of CAL FIRE's updates coming into as a requirement on January 1st of 2026. So just looking ahead, our priorities for the coming fiscal year and the coming calendar year, we'll continue to work with the FPOs and the jurisdictions on those defensible space enforcement guidelines. We are very much interested in strengthening the interagency coordination, between all of the agencies and making sure that the individual MWPA zones are in constant coordination, communication, and that projects maximize impact across boundaries. Continuing to work on new and in some cases interesting pilot programs for vegetation management strategies that take into account the differences across the various landscapes in Marin. And always, balancing risk reduction with an ecological integrity. We are continuing to and want to increase the amount of proactive technical support we provide to MWPA. So we hope that we can continue to collaborate with the operations committee. We hope that questions are directed to us when they're technical in nature, and our committee members are ready to respond. I'm happy to answer any questions about what the committee is working on elsewhere.
Any questions for Todd? Seeing none. Todd, thank you for being here. Any public comment?
And sir, there are no questions or hands raised at this time.
All righty. Any requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, I think we can adjourn the meeting. I don't think we have to have a first and a second for that. So 12:02, Bill says I'm fired because I'm 2 minutes late. He never went over. Thank you all. Have a good day.